Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you all, and I'm honored to be part of this launch discussion. Upon touching into this topic a few weeks ago, there are lots of scary statistics and details, and we have chosen to take an action-oriented approach to building forward with foundational.
Leslie, I think you're on mute.
No, she's not. I hear her fine.
I hope that this is coming through, and I'd like to introduce my colleague in approaching this great topic, who will kick us off. Mike Daley, who's a global tax specialist on the West Coast. We share a lot of common interests and intentions, and it's been a pleasure to create a conversation today.
Yes, we could take all day. I want to thank Mark for introducing me to Leslie. We've had an amazing year getting to know each other. She's a mentor, she's a mom, she's a sister, she's a wife, and she has an amazing legacy story, you know, about mental wellness. And she's put together a phenomenal panel of 4 people today, 2 men, 2 women. And as Mark indicated, we can't only begin to scratch the surface on the different pillars of mental wellness, but we'll give it a shot with a few minutes per speaker. Back to Leslie.
So very briefly, thank you, Mike. I will share with you that my inspiration for connecting into being part of the solutions around mental health and well-being, pre-COVID, post-COVID, for the future, had to do with 2 touch points. One was 1 month, it was August, when I lost 3 different friends and colleagues in my small town in Connecticut. And leaders in the community, successful on the outside in many measurable ways. So that was a touch point of concern to go forward and figure out some solutions. Secondly, over the course of the last 20 months, as Mike knows, I have lost 2 different sisters to extended illness and disability. So I personally pick up the mantle of developing a sense of self-care, grit, and resilience so that I can shine a light on a topic to, you know, create a little less stigma around mental health. I'm really pleased to introduce our first speaker, MJ Gottlieb, who is a successful entrepreneur based in New York City. He navigates the world of building sober, healthy lifestyles through the creation of an innovative application called Loosid. So MJ, thank you for joining us. We'll look forward to hearing your perspective on global abuse, addiction, and building healthy lifestyle.
Thanks so much, Leslie. And I know I'm looking at my clock. It's 11:06. I'll stop at 11:11. We have 5 minutes, correct? I hear a feedback. You guys hear feedback? No? Okay. So thanks so much, Leslie. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to be speaking for Leslie about a subset of mental health addiction. 300 million people suffer from alcohol use disorders worldwide, and 95.3 million people suffer from substance use disorders, which is roughly 38% of US adults. The problem is not many people know about this. In order to solve the problem, we need to know the problem that exists and on what magnitude. So there are some of the statistics. What we need to do and what we've been trying to do is destigmatize addiction. Sadly, it's not moving quick enough. And with COVID, things have escalated quite dramatically. The truth is the American Medical Association has declared alcoholism a disease since the late 1950s and addiction a disease since the 80s. So how come everybody seems to think that were bad people, right? I certainly thought I was a bad person. And so what I think that we need to do is the opposite of addiction is connection. And we need to build niche affinity groups with people who share a common bond and get it. Because there's a saying, those amongst us, no explanation is necessary. Those not amongst us, no explanation is possible. So if we have 500 million people suffering, from a disease, and it's a disease of isolation, then the way that you solve this issue, or at least try to make a major dent, is to first show them that they are not alone and put them within niche affinity platforms where they finally realize that there's people that share that exact feeling. Even though our experiences are different, those feelings of isolation and needing to get out of the now is the same. And in order to connect, you need to identify. And so this is one thing that, I've dedicated my life to. The other thing that I want to talk about, and I talk about this quite a bit, is we, as an app in digital, we have the power to embolden and change lives for the better, or we have the ability to absolutely destroy. And what I mean by that is people are using social and to compare and despair and FOMO and fear of missing out. And people are putting pictures of living my best life next to a 20,000 square foot house, a Ferrari. And first of all, normally that's all BS. But what people don't seem to understand is they're killing people. Suicide rates are skyrocketing. Addiction is skyrocketing because they're saying, why can't I be like them? And so we need to have a very, very extensive conversation of how we leverage digital for good or for bad. So as Michael said, I could talk about this for 30 hours, but a deep dive discussion we're going to be having over the next couple of months. But I wanted I know we did a mental health deep dive about 8 months ago, and we're going to be doing it again. But these are some of the main points that I think need to be discussed, because we need to put people together and show people that they are not alone. That's all I got.
What you have is phenomenal. MJ, thank you for kicking off a spotlight on abuse, addiction, and how we can have support tools, some of the positive uses of technology.
Thanks so much, Leslie.
I'd like to next introduce our second speaker. Eberle Thomas is the Chief Revenue Officer of Pepper, and she has surfaced an excellent direction about talking nutrition and brain health and how this applies to our mental wellness. Anne, thank you for joining us on Healthy Food Choices. As Chief Revenue Officer and mother, I look forward to hearing your comments. So if you would provide a brief introduction, thank you.
Can you hear me? You can hear me now. So thank you so much, Leslie. So in addition to my role as Pepper, I am a longtime student and advocate of food and nutrition, motivated by diabetes in my family, and also by my experience with one of my twin daughters, who at age 3 had to undergo intensive feeding therapy in order to learn how to eat, and with several years after that of intensive protocol at meals. And so it's really turned my attention to nutrition. And so when Leslie asked me a couple weeks ago to talk about food and mental health, it really just paired very well with what's developing right now with integrative medicine and the gut-brain connection. So I think when most of us think of food and nutrition, we think sort of like from the neck down, right? We think, okay, well, I'm supposed to eat well so my body functions better. I'm not supposed to eat bad foods because they're going to make me fat. But there is a direct connection between what you eat and your brain. And it has been shown to affect cognitive issues, anxiety, depression, and other sort of concentration issues. The right nutrition can actually help when someone has psychological or neurological issues. The right nutrition can actually help with those issues. And as Mirjana and I were talking about yesterday, we were talking about Alzheimer's, and that's one of her focuses. And there have been studies done on how stress affects the hippocampus. But there have also been studies that show that nutrition affects the hippocampus. And when the gut microbiome is in a depression-inducing pattern, which means you're eating bad food, they actually have seen a change in the activity in your hippocampus. So it's also a factor in Alzheimer's. Not the only one, but it's certainly a factor in Alzheimer's. So I think of food in two categories. Food is either fuel, nutrition, medicine, or fuel is slow poison for your brain. Plants feed your brain, processed foods starve your brain and harm your brain. And when I first read that, it was just very powerful for me. Processed foods starve your brain. It's just, I think that's just so powerful. Likewise, healthy fats protect your brain, and bad fats destroy your brain. I think the food industry, unfortunately, especially the processed food industry, actually has chemists who work to make sure that food is addictive. Processed food is addictive. So I think, for most of us who, or many of us who have at some point thought we were the ones fighting, trying to eat healthy, you're not being helped by the food industry. And I think a lot of times you have to really do something very extreme to sort of break that pattern. So I think, as Leslie is putting together a sort of integrative approach to mental health, nutrition is just one of those key components. You really can't think about helping mental health without thinking about the right nutrition. So.
And thank you. I share the commitment to eat a lot of color and eat from the ground. And there's a lot of sustainability reasons to think about that for the future. I'll throw in the chat a couple of resources. One is Dr. Mark Hyman, who has a lot of point of view on integrated health and wellness. And another is a guide to cognitive health published by Harvard Business Review, which essentially is similar to the framework that we are starting to chip away at this morning on wellness. So it's a pleasure to move forward and introduce Mirjana Prokic. She has joined us. She's UK based and navigates a really interesting world of emphasizing innovation. And she's just joining us from a trip to Dubai and will address rest, relaxation, and the importance of good sleep hygiene in the whole context of wellness. Thank you, Mirjana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Mark, and everyone here. Yes, I am based in UK. I am sleep deprived, funny enough, coming from Dubai in fact 9 hours. And the reason why I started hangAIR is from my own personal pain, mental and physical. Being in the past global chief marketing officer in chemical industry, as well as business turnaround specialist, helping SMEs to scale up to be sold to Fortune 500s. So just imagine all my life in the last 12 years before starting this business was on the plane, changing time zones, sitting for long hours, having terrible back pain. You just can't sleep, you can't function. And the only thing that kept me going is my swimming routine and my running routine and eating routine. So point to Anne's discussion or points earlier, diet doesn't work, but changing the habits in our mind, how we approach to eating, sleeping, drinking, because these are three main functions that keep us alive, is the key. So, and funny enough, we as a society actually put all these three main functions on the back burner, and we don't think about them. So what we are only focusing on, let's just do everything we can now. Let's just sleep deprive ourselves. Let's just starve ourselves. Anything can wait. What happens later when we are 65, 70, 80, we hit the moment when we only have a body and mind is gone. So Alzheimer's hits. And lots of research is pointing now that is actually fast forward because of all different problems that we don't really pay attention to. So in terms of sleep, one thing I just want to point out right now is if we can't sleep 7.5 hours, which is the main norm for our brain to keep sane, keep focused, productive, make those decisions with a clear mind, and be there for our loved ones as well with the full ourselves or full presence. The main problem is how we can make up for that loss of sleep. We cannot. So there are techniques and technologies that are popping up that there is possibility maybe to hack somehow that sleep deprivation through power naps. But how and where, so just power nap itself, it doesn't really help memory consolidation to happen. But there is a rocking element and rocking device that can enhance that memory consolidation and clear that beta amyloid protein, which is actually the distractor of our memory storage. And so this is something that I've been studying with lots of scientists and doctors in the past 4 years. And we built our prototypes and tested excessively with lots of people. We have some amazing doctors and scientists on the board, and one of them treated our Prime Minister Boris Johnson from COVID last year. So there are ways to help, and but first is that hygiene of clarity in our mind and how we can pay attention to these three issues. I have some slides I just wanted to show. I don't know if we can show that, but okay, there is a video about a product that I designed together with doctors, scientists, and designers, which is world's first forward incliner, and I don't know if there is a sound as well, but combines benefits of body suspension, so lean forward for people with back pain, rocking motion, and sensorial technologies. So when I said, it's a shame you can't hear it, but I'm happy to share this video with everyone who's interested to learn more. But in terms of everyone, even science, we all, when we want to research something, we focus on one problem in silos. But actually, we have to step back and focus holistically on connection between body and mind and what really influences one problem and how they're all connected. So stress point, we are working crazy hours, we are so stressed, that influences our body spasm and musculoskeletal problems. So you're constantly in that muscular kind of tension. Eventually that turns into low back pain, and that becomes a chronic problem. Eventually that takes you to insomnia because you can't sleep from that pain, but also that mental stress is hurting you. And then eventually you are hitting depression as well. So everything is so interconnected, and yet we are just looking into silos. I'm glad that MJ actually showed and explained substance abuse as well, because that's another connection to sleep deprivation as well. Because if you can't sleep, if you're totally stressed, you're not good for yourself, you're not good for your loved ones, you're not good for society, you're not working anymore because you can't go to work, because you're in pain, and that costs economies huge amount of money. So I just pulled some numbers here, and this is global problem, obviously, and sleep deprivation is 2.5 billion people in the world suffer from. That costs 400 billion, this is the other one, 745 billion US dollars a year. Five main global economies. Stress and anxiety and depression, 2.6 billion of people. And funny enough, during COVID, daily cost of depression, stress and anxiety was 3.15 billion a day in the UK. Just imagine how big it is in the States. And back pain for 550 million people that are registered with back pain issues. And then if you go into the States, because this is very close to your heart, majority of you are from here, 32% of people have sleeping difficulties, which cost 400 billion a year, US economy. And in terms of stress, anxiety, and depression, 1 in 5 people suffer from. So here, in this room, how many of us? Probably 20–30% of us have some of these difficulties that we are not willing to talk and share with others. And then back pain is costing on a yearly basis 100 billion US economy. But the problem is people who commit suicide as well, and costs lives, costs families, economies, and world overall. So this is what I'm focusing about. This is Impact Investment Summit, and this is something that is so relevant to today's topic. So thank you for that, and this is a great panel. I'm very glad to be here. Thanks.
Mirjana, thank you for shedding light on this topic. I mean, how basic eating and sleep and healthy lifestyle choices. So these are our initial foundation discussions. And we have lots more.
Leslie, we can't hear you, just wait for a sec.
Sorry, are we good to go?
I think so.
Okay, I'd like to next introduce David Burstein, who is a successful investor in the mental health and wellness space. David, thank you for joining us. He is going to share a look at the mental health sector, investment opportunities, voids, and challenges in this emerging landscape of well-being. He is the director of Redirection Strategies, a frequent speaker, commentator on millennials, social innovation, and politics. And David, thank you for joining us to talk about innovation.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. All right. Hi, everyone. And thanks to everyone who's been on the panel. I actually think it's kind of fitting that I'm going at the end of this because over the last several years, in addition to the background Leslie just mentioned, I've been really focused on the mental health space. I've been lucky to invest in a lot of really great early stage mental health companies, many of which have now done very well. We have several unicorns and a couple SPACs in our portfolio on the mental health front. And work with some really great founders, as well as get involved with a lot of folks in the nonprofit side. And as you heard today, this is a pretty massive sector that kind of span. If you include everything that we're talking about: nutrition, health, sleep, meditation, addiction. You look at the projections are this is like a $5 to $6 trillion sector in the next decade, and it's only going up and up as all of the many problems on all of these fronts continue to permeate through our society. So the question really is, what do we do about it? And traditionally, mental health has been in the bucket of government funding, nonprofits, and that's kind of how people have thought about it. It's become clear, I think, now, slowly to more people. It became clear to me, 10 years ago, but I think now has become clear to investors in the market that this is a problem that needs more scalable solutions than any kind of nonprofit enterprise can provide. The government certainly can and should do more, and you're seeing states and federal government increase resources, but it's inevitably not going to be enough. And a lot of organizations are trying to scale, but you've seen. Okay. Is that okay? Great. That's better. But we're starting to actually see, and we've seen over the last year, a number of exits and SPACs in the space and mergers, which I think are actually showing people that there is possibility for it. And so far, the majority of those, have kind of been what I would describe as kind of two categories. Consumer applications, things like Headspace and Calm, which have scaled very successfully, but are basically at the core kind of CPG companies, or subscription companies. They're really kind of selling people a discrete service, which, despite a lot of their best efforts, we know that meditation helps. There's a lot of studies and research about it, but people inevitably need much more than that, and so that's sort of one piece of it. The second piece are things to help employers manage the costs and treatment around mental health. And that has also become a growing sector as more and more employees, and this has obviously increased with COVID even tremendously, but it was on the rise before that. People need to provide employees, they are realizing, with mental health benefits and care. So those have been the two biggest sectors to date, and they're solving existing business problems, but I would actually go as far as to say, from my analysis of the space and looking at this pretty extensively over the last 5 years, I've probably seen over 500 companies in this space, and they're just growing by leaps and bounds. And looked at the research and the science on this, we're really still not even scratching the surface of the kind of transformational products that can actually help people really manage their well-being and can ultimately be able to provide that at a level of affordability which doesn't currently exist. There have been a lot of efforts to try to, for instance, take therapy, move that online, but still therapy is unaffordable for most people. The kinds of professional services and resources that a lot of people need are really not available on a widespread basis. So the next kind of series of opportunities we have are both on that side of how can we actually bring more services to scale with people, whether that's therapy, whether that's new models and modalities of things like group therapy, which still has a lot of promise and opportunity, and also data and tracking to really be able to help people understand and measure improvements in mental health and well-being, because we can feel it intuitively, but on the cost side of that, that's the biggest obstacle. That's, for instance, keeping insurers from actually covering the kinds of costs that are needed for a lot of these products and services, which will in turn open up the ability to really scale solutions, right? When someone goes in and says this person needs to have a triple bypass immediately, we know exactly what benefit that's going to give, how much that's going to extend someone's life, what the benefit that's going to be to employers. So we have a very precise way for figuring out the cost and the benefit from that, and you gets covered and gets paid for. On the mental health side, it's still all very imprecise because we still are learning and understanding so much about the brain and the gut and the brain-gut connection and how those things work. So a big part of this has eluded us. So I think those are some of the big opportunities on the horizon. But this is just thinking about everything here. This is going to be one of the most, I think, high potential growth sectors over the next decade. So I would encourage folks here to think about the ways that they can contribute and help expand the sector, and look at companies in this space and can make a really big difference.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.